Hello and welcome once again to Releasing Your Inner Dragon, a writing podcast. I am one of your hosts, Maxwell Alexander Drake. I'm an award-winning novelist. I teach writing all over the world. I got a bunch of stuff coming out. You guys know the drill. With me, as always, is my talented and amazingly intelligent co-host, Marie.
Hello, my name is Marie Mullaney. I'm a fantasy author and I run a world-building channel on YouTube.
Today, actually, before today, as always, like, subscribe, help us out. We don't ask very much of you people, like literally just, a little bit of sharing, a little bit of liking gives us what we need to continue this process as we continue to grow this channel. And we really can't grow it without you guys. So if you're getting anything out of this, even if it's just a chuckle or two, even if it's just learning what not to do, you really should give us a like, give us a subscribe, add us to your favorites, share it with your writer buddies or whatever. It really does help us out a lot. So today we're going to go back into the plotting world. As many of you know, we're plotting out start off just plotting out a shorter novella for Marie that turned into me actually co-writing it with her, that turned into us now doing a trilogy. So it's grown substantially in basically the 2 weeks or 3 weeks that we've been working on this. But picking up kind of because we ended up not being able to do, I had some stuff come up, and so we weren't able to do our offline plotting session that we normally do. So we're going to just pick up right where the last podcast left off on this, where we were going to start arguing out some world building stuff, some story building stuff. And then if we have time, we'll get into, we've got the first act pretty well plotted out. We need to move to the first half of the second act and then the second half of the second act and so on and so forth. So if there's time, we'll get into that. But we do have some things that we need to argue out. And by argue out, don't freak out over the harsh word. It just means we're going to discuss, we're going to each give pros and cons. We're each going to, give this a good thought and decide as a team which way we feel as a team is going to be the most advantageous for the story, because both of us know at the end of the day, all that matters is the reader. All that matters is you guys. So as we do this, we'd love to hear your comments on this. Like, what side do you, are you on Team Jacob or Team Edward? I think that's what they were. So are you on, Team 2 cities or Team 1 city is one of the things that we're going to be discussing here. So give us your thoughts down below. Like we read all of our comments, and that's obviously only on YouTube. But if you're listening to some podcast and you do have something you're just dying to say, pop on over to YouTube. Just look up Releasing Your Inner Dragon and bam,
you can find our channel by searching for Releasing Your Inner Dragon. The latest video will be up there, and you can go ahead and comment. And while you're there, hit the subscribe button.
That's right, because that also helps us out. All right. So, I guess we should just dive right in, because we know where we were at the last time. And one of the things I had said right before we got off, and I was like, we don't have time to discuss it now, but I've been kind of mulling over this whole 2 city, 1 city. And you were like, yes, me too. And I was like, oh, great. Sounds like we're on the same page. And then right before this podcast, we're talking about it. And it turns out we're not on the same page. We're actually on different sides of this. So I actually really like that. That's going to make this discussion really interesting. Or we literally hate each other and never talk to each other again, and all of our podcasting is done after this episode. This is literally the could be the finality of our podcasting.
You're setting
journey.
Some high stakes there.
Yeah. Doubt that happens, but anything's possible.
The discussion that the setup was that Drake is thinking we could benefit from going with 1 city.
Well, actually, let's go back. So we have 2 characters.
Yes.
Each are from different worlds. Each have different goals that are going to be juxtaposed to each other. They're eventually going to have to figure out that both are wrong and that there's a third way that's right, that they're going to need to work together to accomplish. And so now that brings us in. Originally, we were talking about different cities, where one is from 1 city and another is from another city. And there are some advantages to that. But, that's really what we're at. Should we combine them into 1 city and have 1 location?
So I will tell you why I feel that 2 cities is important to the stakes. Yeah. The female characters, the position that she's put in is betray your city or lose your sister, right? Because that's kind of the situation that she's in. That's the direty of the choice.
And can we break this down element by element? Because I have an answer to that. Because yes, if you have two teams, you got, again, Team Edward and Team Jacob. If she's on Team Jacob and if she has to betray Team Jacob to let Team Edward win, and it is two different cities, and perhaps her citizens could die from this. Yes, that's personal and so on and so forth. However, I think what is more relatable is the two teams being class based. So we already know that we have one coming from the royalty, from the leadership, and one coming from the streets. So still, her succeeding and giving poor people, or the working class people, an edge up, that because that's really what I was thinking of, that the two teams are set up, and there may even be more teams. We could even go into that. But if we had the two teams where you have the royalty that have the team that has the money, they have the better equipment, they have all this stuff, and they always win. They always get there. They always get the stuff, and they always bring it back. And the poor people don't. But the poor people are encouraged to do it because, man, if you get it, not only do you personally get an extra scratch, but you actually get to help out the neighborhood that you're from, or, and if there's four different neighborhoods that they get pulled from or whatever. And so now it makes it more of a class kind of difference between the two. And if we are going to take the relationship between these two into a Romeo and Juliet way, it also puts more pressure on that relationship because of that.
But you're talking about, so you're talking about a Hunger Games kind of almost setup.
I'm really
not quite, but that kind of like
to
feel.
What was the show that had so much potential that was from the video game that was on Netflix? I can't remember that. I had this problem last time. Imagine Dragons does the theme song for it.
Arcane.
Right. That's set in one city. You had the lower district. You had the upper district. So that's really what I was talking about. So that's just my comeback to that. From a story standpoint, the reason why I like it is if you had this arc that is bringing these people to this place, it seems weird to me that the logical way to do it would be to divide your people up against these different floating platforms. That's another reason why it kind of makes sense to me from the backstory standpoint, is because, we're going to take one expedition ship down there to prepare, for distribution down into the planet, as opposed to a bunch of different floating platforms. Remember, these aren't just cities. They're actually pieces that were distributed from this arc.
Okay, I'm okay with that, with buying into that logic, although I will counter with, it could be that the people split into multiple cities in order to prevent the AI gaining control.
Absolutely.
But the thing about the single cities and the districts that we need to talk about is also a logic thing. Straight humans do not do well on the planet, even with resources, etc., etc. So would they send a team of straight humans, or are we saying that they hire?
They have the straight humans would never go. They're the ones that are like in charge, but they have people loyal to them. They have their guards that get special benefits because they have more resources and money, and their servants and their loyal staff and scientists and everything like that. Their military, I would assume that the upper class is going to have a firm hold on the military, and sure, lower class will then volunteer and get taken into the military, but then they kind of become, you get this extra.
It does remove the jury duty element, though.
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
Because the lower class doesn't have the ability to organize. So it would need some finagling. You are correct. Now that I'm thinking about it. There'd have to be a reason of why, maybe for fairness, we have to, and to make it fair, we're going to, it's going to be randomly chosen. And maybe the upper echelon is supposed to be randomly chosen too. I don't know. No, now that we're going down this, I don't know if I like this idea as much. This is one thing where it hurts me.
So this is where I went down the various debate paths, which was the snags that I encountered that I couldn't think of. So let's try, because you've answered one of my objections, which was the district. But let's talk about the jury duty. So the one counter that I could see is that the lower class people in their districts, it is all jury duty, right? Very Hunger Games style, I volunteer as tribute, etc.
Right.
But in the high classes, when you get selected for jury duty, you can just pay for somebody to take your place.
But the lower class can do that too.
In theory.
Right. You don't have the money for it. Yeah. In theory, it's fair. They can complain all they want. It's not fair. We don't have that kind of money. It's like, well, that's not
the
not
rule our problem. There. Yeah.
You have the ability to do it. Okay. All right.
Yeah. And I mean, that also shines a light on a social issue, which is somewhat close to my heart, which is that, yeah, sure, maybe people can pull themselves up by their bootstraps, and maybe they need occasionally not to starve in the street.
Right. Well, and the thing that threw me here is I've always been against like having a third or whatever group, but what if there is an even lower class district that they always pretty much just die out of the gate? And so, our girl is of the middle class or the lower middle class or whatever. And sure, it sucks to be on that and you're probably not going to win or whatever, but like these guys get no equipment and they have no money because the district itself has to kind of supply the equipment that's needed.
Okay.
And that comes out of the, how much money you actually get from the successful raids on these fallen satellites.
Okay, I can get behind that.
And so the money people have more money to throw at it, so therefore they win almost every time. Very rarely do any of the others. I mean, they have to have won some, or it becomes an exercise in futility, where it's literally just a suicide mission. So there has to be some, 1 out of every 5 times the lower classes win or whatever.
Well, because the lowest class would be the fully adapted. The fully adapted can survive on the planet's surface. So there might be like legends among the fully adapted that actually those who get picked for the teams, they get to like live down on the surface and live free from the, the rooting. Like not all of them could have these legends, but some of them might.
So I disagree with that because there is something that I had in the back of my mind that we haven't talked about. Because that when we've been talking about this, that's always been a logical problem to me. Is like, why would they even live in these cities? So I still think we should make. So maybe they're adapted to the environment, but they're not to just the dangers that live down there.
Exactly. So that's the thing. Like the fully adapted are under this impression that they could live. Like in the city, some of them think that they could live on the planet's surface, but they can't. Like, yes, they can. Like the radiation won't kill them, but there are not fun creatures down there.
Right. So it's going to take all of humanity going down and securing a place and all of that. The adapted aren't equipped in that kind of stuff.
Exactly.
So because there has to be a reason why the adapted haven't said, screw it, I'm just going to go down and live on the planet, start a farm, because you'll get eaten. That's why. Like you can't go start a farm because you'll die.
So if we use money as the solution to that problem, I'm willing to look at the districts, because from a world building perspective, one city is infinitely easier than 2.
Certainly. And again, it makes so much more personal for the romance when you're coming from 2 different warring cities. Yeah, okay, but coming from 2 different classes, I think, is just even that much more.
And I think I'm okay with going with one city if we use the districts thing and we say that there is a rule saying you can buy a substitute. Now, does our boy then fake a substitution, or does he fake not a substitution, or does he just still get himself on as a fifth member of the team?
If that's set up correctly, I think what my would be is he goes to somebody who is just purchased to be a substitute and pays them to be their substitute. So some human gets picked, they hire a mercenary to do it. The kid just figures out who the mercenary is and goes to the mercenary, because that'd be a really cool scene where he's like, yeah, I've already been purchased to, I've already been, whatever we're going to call that thing, where I've already been picked up to I've already been I'm already a replacement. He's like, yeah, I know, that's what I want to talk to you about. Like, wait a minute, I can't be your replacement, I'm already someone else. Like, no, I want to pay you to take that replacement from you. I pay you to be your replacement. And they would be like, wait, I make twice as much money and I don't have to do anything?
Now, he is going to have to pay that merc quite a bit, because it is entirely possible that that mercenary will never work again. I mean, the ruling class, if this gets found out, right, that merc is in a world of hurt from the nobles,
So if nobles are the way they are normally, if we run them kind of a little more cutthroat, I think the only one that's going to be pissed off is the kid's father.
Yes.
And those loyal to the kid's father. Because the other councilmen are like, what do I care what that guy's brat kid did? Like, so I don't know if it would hurt his chance. He might actually even go up, because if the families are infighting.
But they're putting a useless kid on the team, which hurts the team's chances.
True.
So it could,
but again,
be bad for the merc.
Depending on the battle between the council, you losing your child, even though I lose the expedition, still might be more valuable to me. Like, if I had to choose between your kid dying and me gaining my cut of the expedition, it's more advantageous for me to have your kid die. I'm just saying that, like, it just depends on how cutthroat we make the council and how much infighting the council is actually having for vie of power, ultimate power, as they're fighting for their, whatever, because they own the lower classes. The lower classes aren't going to threaten them in any way. Yeah. So, it just depends on how much we go. So it may not be, and it could also be, if you really wanted to make sure that there's no logistical hole there, it could be the mercenary goes, like, I'm going to have to get permission for this. And then, or you need to get permission from this. And then he goes back to, and maybe it's the rival, his father, where it's like, so yeah, you know what? You got my permission for that, kid. Just if you wanted to really make sure that there's no logical inconsistencies and the audience completely understands the political structure that just happened.
I do like him faking something.
I do like that too, where he shows his resolve.
So what if he fakes permission from the council for this mercenary?
We could definitely, because there's a couple ways he could fake it to where, so a couple of scenes just popped in my head. So you have the human that got volunteered, that got, picked up, and he's actually there with the mercenary, doing that transition where the kid shows up and says, no, there was a mistake. I was picked. Yeah. So it could be that.
Because I do like that, because it makes for a good connection with Ghost in the Machine.
Right. And I knew where you're going with that. And I like it better because I don't think especially in the beginning, I don't think he's thinking 2 moves ahead. Whereas when the lottery's already happened and now he goes, I want to be on this. How do I do that? This gives him a very intelligent solution to have the Ghost in the Shell rig it to where it says no mistake, it wasn't your name. So one of the other things you want to do when you're kind of thinking about plotting everything like that, and this isn't for Marie, this is really for everybody listening, you want to look for scenes that are going to allow you to show things that you want the audience to know as opposed to telling them. So since we have this thing, which I really like, that the humans do get picked, but they have the ability to purchase, a mercenary substitute for them. There's no way to show that unless the kid is literally involved in on that. So if we have a scene where he's gotten the Ghost of Michelle to get his name and take out the other name, and he has to go make sure that stops, then when he shows up and says, no, actually, you weren't picked, there was a mistake, there was a glitch in the system, it's actually me, that actually has the ability to show that mercenary transaction that the human wasn't going to go on it. And then, there could be something like where the mercenary turns and goes, okay, well, I guess I'm working for you. And the kid's like, I think I'm going to do this one on my own. And the mercenary be like, wait, what? That you guys don't do, you're going to die down there. And then it also shows another reaction to this to up its stakes and everything like that. So that's one of the things I look for when I'm looking for scenes. I'm also going, okay, I know this about the world building, or I know this about the plot story, or I know this about the character backstory. How can I come up with scenes that are going to move the story? Because obviously that scene needs to happen to move the story, but there's a dozen ways we could create a scene that does that. This scene, where he's actually interrupting the transaction between the actual chosen human and a mercenary, allows us to actually show that these mercenaries are purchased. Whereas if we didn't do that, we'd have to tell it as a backstory. We'd have to, be like, well, normally a human would buy the mercenary, but now we're going to just do so you'd have to tell it as opposed to showing it. So always look for scenes that are going to allow you to double dip basically in this.
So I am happy, because those were my two big objections to the single city. I was
Which is funny because just so everybody knows, this isn't a Drake win, because in the second one, Drake had already bowed out and realized that Drake was wrong, and Marie's the one that actually pulled me back from that, because I was like, oh yeah, no, this isn't going to work. I don't like this at all. So, and you can throw the red flag and go back and watch the tape. So that's just being open-minded. I was willing to, once we hit that thing and I was like, yeah, no, I don't like this. This isn't going to work. Still being able to chase that rabbit and not, as I always say, whatever your first idea is probably the worst idea, because that's going to be the obvious idea that all your readers are going to come up with too. Put it aside. Have these discussions, whether it's with yourself, whether it's with someone else. Like I said, I don't plot alone. So I plot with, I mentioned Charlie a lot. I plot with Charlie. Me and Marie doing this with the realm. I'm dealing with AC and Rob. So, you're just not an island as a writer in my, or at least I'm not. Maybe it's because I'm just not smart enough to do it on my own. But I think that you get so much more when you're dealing with other people's ideas and having to reconcile those.
And I think it's so important to be open to change. Like I said to you, because I was sitting with those multiple cities going like, I have to invent a culture for each city. It's a lot of, there's a lot of like complexity around it.
And that adds word count. And I love that you use the word complexity, because remember, I talk about everything you do in a story is going to add complexity and
complications.
Complications. Thank you. Conflict got stuck in my head. So complexity and complications. We want complications in our story, but every complication adds complexity. Complexity means more time spent with words describing everything to the audience. So you want to make sure that the complication that is added is more advantageous than the word counts that you're going to waste describing the complexity. So that was my problem with the two cities is because like, okay, but what does that add to the story?
So the reason why I was so set on the two cities is those two things that when I was thinking about it originally, I couldn't find a solution for. It was the jury duty problem and the motivation of betraying your city versus, but because if all the resources goes to the city anyway, then what's the big deal with the betrayal?
Right.
That was
but we do need to, making that switch will mean that we do have to think about and come up with a way to show the audience that this. And so I looked up, we can't obviously use district because to Hunger Games, but we have we have province, we have municipality, we have precinct, we have borough, we have jurisdiction, we have township, we have ward, we have
I like precinct just because of our setting. So this is, I mean, these were modern, far modern, far future people who have set up, they would have had modern words, not old words.
right.
So a word like precinct would come naturally to them when dividing their city up, I think.
And by the way, I didn't just make all those up. That is the power of onelook.com, as I always say. And I don't get sponsored from these people, though I should. Onelook.com, it's open always when I'm writing. Like, I never have it not open. And it's there's thesaurus. You have to click on related words button or go to onelook.com/thesaurus. I just can't spell thesaurus. So I click on the button. But yeah, so we do have to
we've got to show the stakes for the precinct.
We've got to show the stakes. We got to show how much value would be gained for her what do we say, precinct, for her precinct. Also, precinct is a cop term, so it comes up with some military, some rules, rigidity, stuff like that that I think plays in well with this.
It starts playing for me with the potential police state vibe from the council.
Exactly.
I love me a good police state.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to live in one, don't get me wrong, but they're fun to write.
Oh yeah. And we could actually call, instead of like the mayor of the precinct, it would be the chief to continue on down with that, or the captain, or whatever, if we want to, whatever we want to do as far as dealing with more of a militaristic police state kind of thing. And of course, when it was originally set up, it's just, well, yeah, this is just, it's not like you're in a police state. You just live in that precinct. Like, somebody's got to be in charge of security and everything else. That's all it is. And, it's evolved over the generations to something a little more sinister, as it usually does. So anyway, we would have to make sure that we really look for a scene or two that shows how much benefit. Maybe there's still some residue from the last time this precinct won, and there's still some trailing benefits from that that's going to be running out or whatever. So, and also I was thinking, and this is a spoiler, so if you're listening to this, you're going to get a lot of spoilers just because we're plotting it out and this is how it happens. But having the audience learn at a later date, and it would be through the kid, it would be the shock that the kid would learn that technically the council has never lost. They just know that there has to be a reason why they need those others, and it might be just to be cannon fodder to take some of the damage on the way to this thing. And so they need these other districts to kind of pave the way so that it softens up the journey for everybody. And so because they need these other teams going, they actually just give them a win occasionally. And it's always because the satellite doesn't have an abundance of resources. But this satellite obviously would have to be a big prize. So even though the other districts have won, or the other precincts have won, from time to time, it's always been smaller satellites or less, and maybe they have a way to track like what type it is or how big it is, or maybe it's giving off a certain the more jurin that's in it, the more feedback they get, or the more whatever the radar picks it up, whatever you want to say. So they have the ability to know, oh, this is a gold mine, where that's a coal mine.
That's a lesser one, and then we can let the lower guys get that one, give them a little bit of hope.
Right. Yeah. So we're going to go down, and the team's not really going to try, and they're not going to even get to the thing, and they're just going to kind of meander around and do their thing and then come back failures. Oh, shucks, we failed at that one. But good for you guys. Good for you guys. Look, I mean, it's just awesome that you guys won that one. Yep, you beat us fair and square. So that might be a really interesting thing. And that might not even happen until the second book.
They they don't even really need a reason to give the lower classes a win or whatever. It might be that the entire setup of like racing for the resources is to give the lower classes the illusion that they could get resources out of this, enough resources to turn their precinct into a council level precinct.
Oh, I like that. Like the council, like, so okay, okay.
To
What if there are, and we don't have to go with nine. To me, that's why I was hesitating a little bit. But what if there are 3 or 4 or 5 precincts that run everything, and you have to be at a certain level? So it's sort of like, I don't remember what it is, but in America,
no, it's like Merchant of Venice, not Merchant of Venice, the play. It's like Venice, the Republic, the Serene Republic, where your name, in order to vote, in order to be part of the Senators' Council, your name has to be in the Golden Book of Nobles, and you can buy your way onto that if you have enough money, because it's a merchant city, like that. In theory, you could have a lower class precinct. They could hoard their resources, and they
right,
could put a councilman on the council
right,
if they gathered enough of these satellites. And that's why they're allowed
yep,
to compete. Look, we are allowing free competition. Look at us being
yeah, it's a democracy.
fair to you.
Democracy. You just got to pay, you just got to work. Like we worked for ours. That's all you got to do. You got to put in the effort, you got to put in the time, and then you become one of our equals.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like we're going to do everything in our power to hamstring you and make sure that you never actually make that. But whatever. You can definitely, we would never be opposed to you taking your rightful place amongst us council members. Absolutely. That's what we live for. We literally live for the hope that one day you guys do what we did and work really hard and basically, can put your
councilman to your one of to put your chief on the council.
right.
No.
Which, yeah, that means that the precinct chief, captain, whatever, needs to be actually important in that region, because they need to be the one that's running the lottery and going, come on guys, we can do it this time. And of course they'd be the traditional politician too, where some of them would be like, you can get me up there and I will go up there and I will do justice for our precinct, and others are like, you can get me up there and I can do everything, but I'm actually getting paid from the other councils to make sure that you guys fail, and I get to live like a king, so I don't care that the precinct is going to stay where it's at. So yeah, there's all sorts of things to do with that would be really fun.
Yeah. So I think
And so now, so the problem that I had before with having multiple cities going after this, like, because remember, I think originally we were like 5 or 7 or whatever, and it's like, wow, that's a lot. But if we make the planet so dangerous that radiation is the least of your problems, that you're going to have to actually, there is a softening that needs to happen on the path toward where this thing is at, then the council teams would need to actually have you. Now, if we do that for ease of the story, I still think that we should maybe even do a lottery of which precincts get to go.
Yeah.
Like, we don't want to waste all the resources of the city. So the first thing that happens is a lottery on only 3 precincts can go, or only 4 precincts can go. And then, okay, now we pick those. Now each precinct now run your lottery to do your thing.
Yeah. I think that works well. And so let me just make a note of lottery within a lottery. I want to talk a little bit about the planet, because I was doing a little bit of work on the planet. So let me share my screen. Not that it's that impressive to look at, but So when I create really weird worlds, I like to split my thought process up around having producers, herbivores, carnivores, parasites, and sophorites. So producers are our plant equivalent.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I thought that it would be interesting to have producers. Look, we're talking a hydrogen world, right? So to have producers that absorb hydrogen and form oxygen and glucose inside themselves. And they actually make the environment a little cooler, a little bit more livable. Okay. And that's what your plant equivalents are like. So you could get like what you need as a human from plants, but you need to be super careful because oxygen and hydrogen and fire do not mix well, especially not with human skin. Right? Then the herbivores, they are in my head, they're kind of like dragonflies. Okay, so they plunge like these proboscis beaks into the plants, these huge beaks, and they suck what they need straight out of the plants without spilling anything. So they form these like seals. Now the carnivores, some of them will be actual fire-breathing species because the internal setup of these animals is not electric, it's fire. Some of them are like internal combustion engines. So some of them can like control fire, and some of them can like, spray fire. And some of the parasites, because their skeletons are like ceramics, right? If they die, they can explode from the inside and be like exploding hand grenade beetles.
Shards of glass.
Yeah.
Or glass-like substance.
On explosion. And then your sophorites, which is things like fungi and so on that digest dead creatures. So they would be kind of like walking fairy fire, right? So they kind of glow as they're like absorbing things.
Yeah, one thing I said in my Q&A was I've never met somebody that is as awesome at world building as you, so I get to take advantage of the fact that I could just lay a great story on top of your great world building. So it's kind of a match made in heaven.
So those are kind of my initial thoughts for these creatures. So, and obviously you can fit any creature in there that you like, right? I mean,
right. Yeah, it's fantastic. And I don't think I ever would have gone that deep.
It helps because it means that when we set up creatures, we don't have to fill in all of the details. We know roughly what these things do and what they look like. So every time we need a new creature, it will fit. The whole world will fit because we know what the basis is. So going back here, like that softening process would for me be that team travels kind of period where the two teams are separate. And I guess we can show like the teams dying, because so I think what we should do is we should have some of the, like, say a team dies, but one member survives. And one of the teams comes across it and they're like, okay, well, if we take you in, are you going to demand, resources from our district? Like they have this complicated negotiation process around what happens to surviving team members. So that you kind of show the deadliness of the world and like people kind of combining and splitting in teams.
Yeah. Now, how many? I think we should have, because the other teams were never going to be, they're only going to be teams that we see things happen to.
Yes.
So I think we should have 4 or 5 teams. But whatever we decide on, we need to up it by 1, because I think one team needs to die on the way down, the whole team, just to show something dangerous about something. So I think, as all of them are descending, one, either a technological failure and they fall to their death, or there's some weird monster thing, or whatever. Like I think just start off the level of deadliness of this journey that they're about to go on. I think it needs to happen on the way down. So whatever we decide, if we decide 4 or 5 teams that are going to go, we're actually going to add it by 1. And again, this may sound, what I just said may sound very cliche or very systematic. You're like, well, wait a minute, why? But you got to think about the tone of the story and what the reader's going to get out of it. And yes, it's not going to necessarily come out of any, nowhere where it's like, oh, that's really original, but it does set an expectation, and that's what we're trying to do. So yeah, okay, maybe it is pretty, obvious or cliche to kill one of the teams on the way down from a storytelling standpoint, but from a storytelling standpoint, it does so much to add to what the readers are going to start feeling, and the sense of urgency and the sense of deadliness and everything like that, that it's well worth the fact that nobody's going to go, oh wow, I didn't see that coming. Like, okay, great, but it still adds to this thing that we're trying to do.
Sometimes you do the cliche thing because the cliche does exactly what you need it to do.
Right, exactly.
Okay, so I'm for 5 teams. I think that 5 teams means that we can have like teams being picked off and rejoined in a kind of organic way.
So in other words, we're talking 6 teams.
Yeah,
because then that gives us 12 people basically that will be tertiary characters that we can watch and use as that cannon fodder kind of thing. One of the things that I had a problem with your original one was you were actually thinking about even doing a POV from every single team, and so it's like, oh man, that is a lot. But using them as well, I make the joke in Guards that a tertiary character should never let the writer notice they exist, because all you're going to be used is you're going to die as a lesson to the heroes.
Yeah.
So that's basically gives us 12 lessons that we can use. Really willy-nilly. They're just red-shirted crewmen at that point, but they give lessons to the POVs, which in turn gives lessons to the audience.
And we can also, like, some of them, like one who survives can come into one of the core teams and hence become a secondary character whose death is more impactful.
Right. Yeah, 100%. Because we also have 6 people on those teams that aren't the 2 POV characters that we're actually going to get to know and know their names and, kind of chummy with. So yeah. Mm-hmm. And that's how you use the difference between tertiary characters and secondary characters. Yep. So yeah, I think that works really well number-wise. And when we get into it, we can always decide. I mean, changing. I mean, that's the thing that a lot of people don't realize, how easy things are to edit. So it's like we could start with 5 teams and go, man, we've got 4 people that we just don't know what to do with. They're a waste. So you just go back and it's like, oh, there was actually only 4 teams that went. And then, you do your thing.
Exactly.
Because you don't want to have a team that you ever mention.
Yeah.
That's just Chekhov's gun.
Yeah. No, you must use the things that you mention. It's right. Very bad not to. But I feel like 5 teams gives us kind of flexibility, because 4 teams is very much like 2 teams die, 2 teams survive. Whereas 5 teams adds an element of like, it gives me a little bit more. It feels like it gives me a little bit more flexibility and playroom.
Right. Well, here's a couple other things that I know we've already decided on one city, but I still want to argue that to kind of show so another thing, because there was one other thing that I was thinking about bringing up in the argument that we never did, but I think it's relevant. So one of the things that I had a problem with on your original thing was, okay, so we've got 3 or 4 cities that are going to go after this, and the city needs it or they're going to die, but each city only sends 4 people. Like it's that important. Whereas now, since as far as the city's concerned, the resources come back to it regardless. And we know we need, if we're going to do 6 teams, we know one's going to die on the way. But if the city knows, okay, with sending out 6 teams, we win every time. We will always get that satellite back no matter what. No matter what happens, someone of, if 6 teams is enough, and we're never going to not get the resources that the city needs. That makes more sense to me now, because now it's like, okay, yeah, the city overall, regardless of which precinct wins, the city wins.
Yeah.
And so, because some of those resources have to go to the city for maintenance, like the anti-grav stuff and, all the different things that are running the city and everything like that. We're going to use it for the whole city as a whole. Yeah.
And then the council will pay that precinct for, the things that they've brought back. They're like,
right.
Yeah.
Right. So that makes now more sense, because it was a logical problem that I had with that
Yeah.
in the beginning. And you kind of fixed it with the whole, well, they're trying to be fair. But when life and death is on the line, you're not going to be fair. But with this, if the city needs the resources and the city knows that 6 teams is enough to succeed, and we're just competing against different aspects of the city, I think that becomes much more logical to me, than
Yeah.
limiting one city to 4 people. And if they don't get it, they lose. Because if I'm going to lose, I'm going to throw everything at it. I mean, I'm going to send the whole freaking town after it, especially like the one that you had, which was the anti-grav was going to break and we're all going to die. It's like, yeah, every one of you people are going. I'm going too. We're all going. Like all 300,000 of us. But that's cheating. I don't care. We're going to die if we don't. So, that just, now that fills that logical gap too, in my mind. All right. So I think we've covered a lot here. We're just under the hour, but that's fine. What I'd like to know is, again, I'd like to know what you guys think. Eventually, hopefully, this is going to be a book that you guys are going to pick up and read and want to see how it happened and how we pull off, because the devil's in the details. You guys are going to get some of those details too, because we're going to edit this and kind of do that during the writing stage. Again, our goal is to get this done and out by June.
Yeah, so our goal is to finish the plotting by the end of November.
Okay, this month.
Now, you'll be watching this episode when hopefully the plotting will be finished, because we pre-record a lot of content. But then after that, we will start the writing process, and then we will do the occasional live editing episodes where you can check out how we change things.
Well, and also, don't, just because Marie just said, hey, we're actually probably already going to be past the editing stage, we're going to be past the plotting stage by the time you guys see this. Again, I said earlier in this podcast, it's very easy to incorporate new ideas and to change stuff and stuff like that. So don't go, oh, well, I'm not going to give them my idea because who cares? It still is very important to us, because until the book is published in June, anything can be redone, anything, and rather quickly. That's the other thing I've never understood, why people are so afraid of editing and doing changes. Even massive changes really don't take very long. They're not hard to incorporate once you have everything else all worked out. It just lines right in. So
absolutely. So
just
hit us with the biggest change you've got, and we will seriously consider it. Like,
oh yeah, always.
No fear.
And then yeah, and then hopefully you guys will continue to stay with us on this journey and see what it turns out to when we finally get this book out.
Yep. And we will see you soon for another episode of Releasing Your Inner Dragon.
Bye.